The concept of Burntrap has been annoying me since I first learned of his existence, since it seemingly exists separate from Glitchtrap. Up until this point, we were running under the assumption that William's body finally aided in the FNAF 6 fire, but that his soul ended up latching onto a hard drive that got scanned into Help Wanted, which is how Glitchtrap was born, because William was able to use the agony from the fire to keep on living and finally become a spirit, something like that. But with some of William's body still being in this suit, what the hell is going on here? That's what we're exploring and aim to answer today. And you know what? I think I did. The main issue I've been having is whether William is dead or alive. And there are a couple different things to consider here. Firstly, he is seemingly in a new endoskeleton, which would indicate that he's dead and Glitchtrap's consciousness is just being transferred into Burntrap's spot via the recharge station. But his head is clearly visible. Like, you can see his skull and his actual human jaw, meaning that he could still be holding on to this world via that head, especially given who we're talking about here. The most stubborn to ever grace our screens. This also can't be a new endo, and just the model that they're using for the others since it was easier and they could release the game faster. This seems to be indicated by the way that Burntrap walks. If this was a new endoskeleton, why would he be shambling like a zombie? But the claws and repaired sections to the actual endo also seem to indicate that this is also a new endo and possibly even Glamrock Bonnie's. So there's a whole lot of wrong going on here. All the points are intersecting and it's not fun. Originally, I was against the whole Glamrock Bonnie endoskeleton thing because, well, frankly, the body in the suit kind of disproved it for me, but I think I might have found a way to make it work. However, looking at the model, I'm still not 100% sure. If this was the Glamrock Bonnie endo, it would need to have broader shoulders and actually be shorter. Like, even scaling the Glamrock endo so that they're the same height, the endos, when posed the same and lined up, just they don't match. There are similarities, of course, between the two designs, but there aren't enough similarities where I can call this even really above 50%. There's also the issue of the muscles being woven throughout the body, or maybe those are nerve fibers. If it was just the head, I'd understand, since they could have just pulled the old endo head and put it onto the new body. Since all the parts were intertwined, Afton's head would have come with it. But with the muscles throughout the rest of the endo, that's way too intricate to actually have been placed there. And they would only be there and not dangling if it had been stuck there after being shoved full of machine parts. I don't think that they're taking super glue to glue these fibers back onto a new endoskeleton, especially if they do decide to kill him off permanently, since now he's just sentient code after having his soul burnt out of FNAF 6's fire. But having him chase us around the Pizzaplex and making the Freddy mech useless at times and really just being a horrifying antagonist would really help sell how terrifying this version was intended to be, and something I feel should have been in the base game, since, you know, he's the most iconic character in the entirety of the FNAF series, you know, purple guy, the main killer, something that was teased in the very first trailer and then yet maybe had 5 minutes of screen time, unless you're bad at the game like I am, and then in that case he had like 30 minutes to an hour of screen time. And don't even get me started on how horrible his death was, if that was even a death. Killing this man off screen is probably the rudest thing I think Scott could do to me. Like, I want to see this man, and this man being William, die. I want to be the one who causes it. I want to see the light leave his eyes. I want to see that last bit of code float into the air with his demonic purple eyes and then dissipate. Okay, I want to watch him suffer. It's the least that he deserves. Plus, with Burntrap and Vanny roaming the Pizzaplex, maybe we could actually figure out what happened to those other missing kids that potentially drew us to the Pizzaplex to begin with. I mean, Vanny says in the first trailer that they're supposed to be our friends, right? Like, I don't know, maybe she got to Gregory's orphanage, or like kind of like raided it with a bunch of animatronics. Man, like a World of Warcraft raid, but with animatronics. I don't know. Like, maybe this is the way that Vanny's room above Phaser Blast would be open for closer inspection without the Phaser Blast ending button. Maybe there's an additional secret room or duffel bag or like a present with some story lore that points to what really happened to those kids, and then we can actually go and try and figure it out. If they were killed maybe, or kidnapped, or used to fuel Afton. I mean, this could be a really good way for the story to really establish itself since, you know, the game was released unfinished despite being a couple years late. Maybe something like this was always intended, but since there were so many delays, we had to deal with an underused and hardly terrifying antagonist despite the ability to make him so much more. But then again, maybe I'm just enthusiastic and expecting too much from these games, which may or may not be a bad thing. The FNAF DLC is fast approaching. Kind of. Maybe. But the question we're all left asking is, what exactly will this DLC entail? Will there even be a DLC? At this point, when it comes to FNAF, we have no idea. Mostly because the series is in an incredibly weird place currently. With seemingly no official successor after Scott, where could Steel Wool take the story to have it make more sense? And will that direction involve the game's secret main antagonist, Burntrap? That's what we're exploring today. Just like with any of these possible DLC videos, whether it be about the Choose Your Guardian concept or Glamrock Bonnie's return, we first need to check to see how possible it is with where we end up at the end of the game. Well, as far as we can, since the Pizzaplex, or at least part of it, seemingly gets destroyed at the end of the true ending. So, when we choose to stay, is it possible for Burntrap to have more of an impact? Well, it's not as clear as you might think. See, Burntrap, at this moment, is sat in the FNAF 6 pizzeria that's underneath the Pizzaplex, charging in his charging station. However, he only seems to come out of it when ourselves along with Gregory jump down into the final area. So to make this DLC possible, well, we would have to have him wake up for some other reason. Now technically it's unknown if when we drop down Afton ironically wakes up at the same time or if we triggered it somehow, but given that it's FNAF, I'm guessing that us triggering it is more probable and more in line with what the series story was intended to be. So for this DLC to include him, Afton would need to wake up for some other reason, be it maybe a power surge or something that messed with his power supply or potentially gave him a boost that he needed to get out of the charger early. Now that Afton is out of his charger for whatever reason, assuming that that's where the story goes, what could the possible DLC stories be? Well, I'm guessing that Burntrap would somehow be able to get back into the Pizzaplex, despite Freddy telling Gregory that the elevator would only be good for one trip. But who knows, maybe that's because of Gregory and Freddy's weight combined or something like that. Maybe with just Afton in it, it would be able to make more than one trip, since after all it is how the animatronics were getting down to dig the tunnel in the first place, right? Anyways, Afton probably would get back up and then start roaming around the Pizzaplex, probably corrupting anything that he could. This would probably lead to another ending where we would either defeat Burntrap in the Pizzaplex or then maybe have to lure him back down into the basement. But in my eyes, in my mind, I think that we should have to lure him down to the parts and service room. Mostly because Vanessa told us to come to the main stage once we got into the elevator when trying to escape after you get Roxy's eyes. But if you listen to Vanessa, then go check the stage. There's nothing there for you. It just seems to be a time waster so that Moondrop has a better chance of getting you. But in my eyes, this seems like more of a game mechanic thing than an in-game thing. Like in the game universe, all he would need to do to catch you is just make it to you instead of waiting until it's exactly 1 hour. So there would have to be some reason that she called you there in the first place, right? Well, maybe it's because that's where Burntrap was, and now we gotta bring him down to parts and service to dismantle him and end his spree for good. Maybe we can get some main antagonist action where the animatronics roaming the Pizzaplex are instead replaced with the main villains of Burntrap and Vanny. Kind of like Nightmare Fredbear, Nightmare, or Nightmarion style, since those characters also replaced all of the villains in FNAF 4 when they were out. This would definitely make Vanny and Burntrap seem more powerful and important than the other animatronics, especially if this only happened once we destroyed all three, since then we would assume that they were kind of tossed aside or forgotten since they didn't really work anymore. And I think that this would also help Burntrap be more menacing, because honestly, looking at him, this is the scariest design for Afton yet. This is the most terrifying version of Springtrap that we have ever had, and we don't actually have to or get to interact with him directly. We don't have a reason to really be scared of him. He doesn't chase us, he doesn't have any real power over us, we burn him from a distance through monitors while pressing buttons, and he only tries to take control over Freddy instead of coming after us, which is what helped us think of this character as a waste. But having him chase us around the Pizzaplex would be an excellent way of making him more unique and terrifying, especially if periodically he would cause us to be forced out of Freddy while trying to take him over, and the only way that we could save Freddy would be maybe to press another button at a save station, or maybe try to activate a save station station or something like that. Something that could possibly jam Afton's frequency or signal or something along those lines. Making Afton a bigger villain would definitely be a better way to go in my eyes, because this man was underused and really kind of wasted in this way. If Afton was going to transfer his head to a new endo, it wouldn't come with the rest of his body bits. It wouldn't. That's not how it works. Which would mean this would have to be Springtrap's endoskeleton, which also explains why it's so run down, why he shambles, and why he hardly has any casing. And Springtrap's design also seems to change from game to game. From FNAF 3 to FNAF 6 he was totally different, so him changing again in Security Breach seems like no big deal in comparison. It's basically normal for him to get a newer and seemingly scarier attempt at his design with a new game. And at least this has an understandable progression from the last game and even from FNAF 3, since it's more run down and not just a bigger head like Scraptrap. It's like he sold his soul for a bigger head and then the demon kinda made a joke out of it. The most reasonable assumption that I have for what happened though was that he was given the hands of Glamrock Bonnie, since it has the claws, and just he wasn't given the entire endoskeleton. But then again, his arms have the bits of muscle and nerve fibers as well, which means that it would have to have been his old one, it would have to have been there from the start, it would have to be the arm of the old endoskeleton, which is a whole other conundrum because Scraptrap was missing an arm and Springtrap didn't have any casing on his foot, yet here we are. I just think that we have to kind of leave this one up to artistic license and accept that it's meant to be the same endoskeleton, just with a replacement part or two from Glamrock Bonnie instead of like the entire endoskeleton. It makes sense, honestly, and it's really the only reasonable explanation that we have. Unless the colors are wrong on the images that I was looking at and the bits on the hands are just meant to be melted casing, which is possible, but I doubt it. As for if he's wanted dead or alive, I think this version of Afton is actually finally dead. And honestly, I'm happy about that because it means that even if he's still here, we can kill him off for good. This is the most logical conclusion to me because, well, other than him basically being only a head, this guy has had multiple backslides of, oh, I'm dead, just kidding. And this time around, while we instantly predicted that he had indeed survived, I think that Scott is finally flipping the narrative on us. We predicted it, so it's not gonna happen. Afton is no longer connected to his body, as we can clearly see from the formation of Glitchtrap. And Glitchtrap being created would only be possible if Afton died, since the one you should not have killed was dead set on keeping him breathing. But Burntrap, this guy doesn't even have lungs anymore. So yeah, this version of Afton's body is dead, but his consciousness lives on. Like how there's like the conspiracy that Walt Disney froze his head. Yeah, well, that's kind of what they did with Glitchtrap. And then that programming was probably uploaded into his old host, or I guess vessel, since I've been rewatching Supernatural. Basically, this guy would be impossible if he wasn't just Afton's code loaded onto an endoskeleton. Plus, the eyes are clearly robotic this time around with purple pupils, rather than the previous iterations that had seemingly real eyes, Afton's actual eyes, since it was in suit mode after he got snapped. And opening his head in those like secret FNAF 3 screens revealed that it was actually like his eyes because they were seemingly in the same place. So, all in all, here's the story of Burntrap as far as I can tell. During the FNAF 6 fire, Afton passes out. Not dead, but still somehow alive thanks to the one you should not have killed, Crying Child. This leads to the events of Ultimate Custom Night that sees Afton stuck in his own mind trying to escape so that his spirit can move on. But Crying Child, represented by a golden bear like the one who crushed his skull, tries to keep him stuck, until eventually he throws everything that he has at him. 50-20 mode. After being so weakened by the fire, William survives this attack on his mind, and Crying Child's spirit is set free, hence the spasming bear at the end of that mode. That's him burning as the fire sets his soul free. William's soul then latches onto the nearest thing that it can find, one of the hard drives in the storage room that the Scraptrap animatronic was being kept in. One that gets scanned to create the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience as the company tries to rebuild its reputation. Then, not wanting to waste the land that was bought for their company, Fazbear Entertainment begins building a new pizzaplex on top of their old location. Whether this is due to Glitchtrap possessing someone higher up at the company through the game or someone just wanting to save money is up in the air, but the remains of the FNAF 6 simulated pizzeria are buried under the pizzaplex's foundation. That's when Vanessa comes along, our player character from Help Wanted, who reassembles the 16 cassette tapes in an effort to destroy Afton once and for all, but ultimately fails, when our mind is distracted by following following Tape Girl's instructions, William locks us in our mind and in the Princess Quest minigame that would later get ported to an arcade cabinet for insurance purposes. And by insurance, I mean like insurance on Vanessa so that she wouldn't easily be able to escape. As Vanny, William then uses the animatronics to dig out his body and put his old endoskeleton in a recharge station so that when he's able to transfer himself back into it, he'll be able to move. After all, at this point, he's not a spirit, but simply coding, which means that in another game, if he is still alive, we'll actually be able to kill him off. He also gives his old suit some upgrades in the form of Glamrock Bonnie's hands and right foot. Why would he not go with a new, more powerful endo, you ask? Because it's William and his Spring Bonnie suit. It's his body in there. Of course he'd want it back. He's been that way for like at least 40 years at this point. It's all he knows. Then as Gregory and Freddy jump down into the pit, William can sense it. Either because he's an animatronic, because one or both of them are meant to be his kids, or something else, he activates his body even though it's not fully charged and tries to take over Freddy. He's not fully charged, hence the shambling, which Gregory ends up preventing with fire, which has surely traumatized Afton by now, and considering how he's only code, this time fire would actually finish the job. Eventually, the place actually catches on fire and Freddy and Gregory escape, but the blob grabs hold of William. Whether it was to save him or seal his fate is unknown, but this almost certainly isn't the end of William Afton's story.
And at 10, Ultimate Custom Night. Now that Security Breach has released and messed with the timeline once more, we know that Ultimate Custom Night was supposed to be like during. Okay, look, we know where it's intended to be, or at least where it had to be because of these new revelations. The original concept was that it was William's personal hell, but the man in room 1280 made some people believe that it was him, like what he was seeing in a coma, like how Crying Child was in a coma for the main gameplay of FNAF 4. But now we know that Ultimate Custom Night is simply what William is seeing while he's unconscious in the recharge station. It's the only thing that really makes sense if we think about it, because you can't really go to hell if you know you're not dead, or if your soul is possessing an animatronic. You kind of need your soul to not have a tether for Crowley to snatch it up and drag it down to the infinite waiting line that is hell. So he kind of can't be in hell until he's actually gone. And at 9, impossible. While Thanos might be inevitable, William should be impossible. Or okay, well, maybe William's not impossible, but Glitch Trap at this point certainly should be. With everything we've seen in these games, possession and anything having to do with such mostly comes from a dead person, or someone who soon dies after pouring their agony into something. So how could Glitch Trap be a thing if William still has his body and the Springtrap suit? Unless Help Wanted takes place after Security Breach, which is also impossible because the ending of Help Wanted is what causes us to be able to free Vanny in the good ending, or I guess the best ending. And because, you know, Princess Quest was ported from a mobile game into arcade cabinets in this one, so after Security Breach we know that Glitch Trap should be impossible, and things got complicated yet again. Great. Innate virus. While Glitch Trap may seemingly be impossible, we do know that William in his robot form does have some form of coded virus that he can use and control, since he starts trying to take over Freddy basically instantly. And if that's the case, this could explain Glitch Trap and subsequently Vanny, because if Glitch Trap was just like William holding his hand to the game while it was being played or something, it kind of gets rid of the whole 2 versions of Afton thing that seemingly still mind boggles me. So it could be an explanation, but it would also imply, however, that the Vanny version of Vanessa is in fact a robot, and it would seem like there are 2 versions if we look at the rooftop ending and the Security Breach office scene where we need to escape before Vanny gets to us, because if we look at the TVs, whoever's talking can be seen, meaning that Vanessa would have to have changed awfully quickly into her Vanny suit to pull off the switch in this time. Plus it explains how he's able to control her, because you know, she's a robot. I can't really be controlled by a computer virus, so... Well, I mean, I probably could.
Number 7, he survived. So obviously, if you have played Security Breach or watched any of your favorite YouTubers or streamers play it at this point, you know that William Afton managed to survive and make it into the game. Not only that, but his physical body even manages to somehow be around. I know, I'm like, isn't this thing completely destroyed at this point? Apparently not. It shows up once more fused with an animatronic suit, managing to have survived all the awful things that have happened to it, like being spring-locked and burned alive. I think he was burned alive twice actually, and also possibly possessed or cursed, depending on which continuity you subscribe to. Though it should be noted that this is probably the most decayed and worse for wear we've seen William Afton look in the flesh. Number 6, Burntrap. This version of William Afton is known as Burntrap. Burntrap is an amalgamation of a bunch of different animatronics, and I believe we actually found the name Burntrap through hacking the game and through looking at the file names. Burntrap is actually a withered Spring Bonnie suit that also has endoskeleton parts from Springlock, Glamrock, and Nightmare animatronic builds as well. Of course, the corpse of William is also permanently bonded with this suit as well, and much of his corpse beneath is visible because of just how withered the suit is. Very little of the suit is still visible, and you can even see all of Afton's skeletal looking gum exposed bottom jaw, as the suit no longer has its bottom jaw attached. Ew. Number 5. Trailer lines. When fans looked into the files belonging to Burntrap within the game, they learned that there was actually a ton of content stored there that simply wasn't used at all in Security Breach, at least as far as we know right now at this moment in time when I'm recording this. However, this content was designed and programmed into his character, it just was never used. Among this content were 2 lines featured in one of the Security Breach trailers that many fans suspected belonged to William Afton himself. Well, it turns out that apparently we were right about that. However, while the lines were found within his files, they were never uttered in the actual game. Either they were put there with the intention of being used, but an opportunity never really presented itself that made sense, or they were used and then later they were cut from the game for some reason. Among them, I believe, was the line, "You will do as I say, you will bring me what I want, and if you fail me, then you will, both of you, burn." Unfortunate, because that line was honestly something I wanted to know more about in terms of how it played into the plot and then the overall lore of the franchise. Like, what does William Afton want? Who is burning? Which 2 people? Is there more than 2? Number 4. The Ruins. Where did William Afton as Burntrap come from? Well, it seems in the game that Vanny was tasked with recovering his body, digging up the ruins of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, which the Mega Pizzaplex happens to have built on top of. Recruiting the Glamrock animatronics against their will, she brings them to the ruins of Freddy Fazbear's and has them dig something up. Likely that something is William Afton's tattered corpse. It's gotta be really tattered at this point. That is how he is able to return with Vanny's help and some convenient construction with the Pizzaplex being built on top of the pizza place. Although this likely was also part of his greater plot as Glitchtrap. Fazbear may have still held the deed to that land and, they decided that they should just make use of it instead of selling that lot and then buying a new one to build on. Makes sense. Although I imagine they would have had to buy more land around it as well, because the Pizzaplex is massive.
Getting close to the end in number 3, escape. After Security Breach, we also know for a fact that Afton did not escape the FNAF 6 pizzeria like everyone was assuming, because he was in front of the flames while all the other animatronics were behind it or inside it. Now, do I think that he tried to leave? Yes. But do I think that he might have intentionally stayed? Maybe. More on that soon. But we know that Afton, along with the other animatronics from FNAF 6 that are now part of the blob, did not make it out of the simulated pizzeria, since that is the pizzeria ruins that we see before making our way down to the actual area where Afton is. The Freddy Fazbear's Pizza we enter after getting out of the elevator is the proof we need. Notice the rectangular stage with a smaller one next to it, the plate colors, the stools, the tables, and even the floor look the same. It also explains why we can find more retro and other posters around, because we also had access to those in FNAF 6. And ultimately, in at number 2, the Man Room 1280. After the events of Security Breach, I think that it's actually finally making sense of the whole Man Room 1280 thing. My original issue with this was that if William still had a physical form in Security Breach and was in a charging station, how could the whole Ultimate Custom Night in Man Room 1280 to Glitchtrap possessing Vanny really work? And while I don't have an explanation for how William was both sentient code and alive in FNAF 9, or alive air quotes, I have worked out a timeline of events here. Perhaps William wasn't ever sentient code at all, and it was just some form of remnant or agony infused virus that was able to infect minds. But also, the events of the games and stories must now be FNAF 6, Ultimate Custom Night, Security Breach, with Man in Room 1280 taking place after Security Breach. Ultimate Custom Night would no longer be his coma fever dream, it would instead be what his mind is doing before we waking up in Security Breach, since coming out of that recharge station would end up being him beating 50-20 mode, unless we're totally wrong about what Ultimate Custom Night is, in which case, I have no fucking clue what's going on. But yeah, so Man in Room 1280 is what happened to William after the blob gets him. at least. That's the closest thing we can say right now. And finally, in at number 1, lied about Remnant. In yesterday's video, I talked about how what we know about Remnant must be a lie, and the explanation of that, link in the iCard. However, the thing is, 3 times we've tried to burn William, and 3 times he's survived. And while that could just be the whole he always comes back thing, this time around, we see that everyone from the FNAF 6 fire seemingly survived. While they are together in the form of the blob, there are still the masks of the puppet and baby present inside it, meaning that the other animatronics also came back. But as far as we know, that shouldn't have been possible. But that's because now we know that William lied about being able to destroy Remnant with fire, as a way I'm sure to make Henry think that there was a way to stop him. But William knew that this wouldn't really kill him, and he got exactly what he wanted. Even got Henry to kill himself in the fire as well to make sure that nobody remembered this place. And if William knew that fire wouldn't kill him, but heard Henry was going to stay, why wouldn't he stay? Like, if he left, Henry would have left too. And if he is able to hear the final speech like we assume, considering how Henry tells him to go to hell, he would also have heard, and for you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you, blah blah blah, I'm assuming you're staying, so am I, okay? William knew that he wouldn't die, but the person hunting him would have died. That's an easy way to finish off your longest adversary. You just stay put, you know you're not gonna die, you're gonna suffer a little bit, but you know you're not gonna permanently die. And you're good. F***ing genius.
Number 10, I always come back. While it seems like William Afton as Burntrap may finally be gone for good, he also might not be. After all, this is William freaking Afton we're talking about here, and the guy has pretty much become immortal, in my eyes at least. He has survived being spring-locked in a spring Bonnie suit, being locked up for years, burned to a crisp, possibly being possessed or haunted by one of his victims, perhaps having his consciousness uploaded into a game, and beyond. But just because it seems like the amalgamated Freddy blob finally took him out doesn't mean that is what happened. Burntrap could have somehow escaped his seemingly deadly fate and managed to get out of the Pizzaplex. Just where he would go next and what he would get up to, we don't really know. But we know it probably wouldn't be anything good. And he's probably up to something. He's probably out there right now. Number 9, Fazbear has the blueprints. When it comes to many of the animatronics that we've encountered in this franchise, it seems to have been implied that either William Afton or his partner Henry Emily in some capacity, or some combination thereof, were the ones responsible for creating said robotic beings. Now that both Henry and William are seemingly gone, however, it is interesting to see Fazbear apparently thriving with both their own meta game that appears to exist within the universe with Help Wanted, and also with their new establishment, the Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex. Considering we also have seen new animatronics here, it must mean that Fazbear Entertainment is now the one behind making these animatronics, and it seems to be implied that as such they have secured the blueprints for the original animatronics and were able to use them to create new ones like Montgomery Gator and Roxanne Wolf. Either that or these are like old animatronics that they've updated, but I feel like it's implied that these are completely fresh, so they made them themselves. This means that William and Henry are really no longer needed with this company, although we don't know if either remains attached at all financially to Fazbear, or even attached to their founding story or their history. However, this also opens up the possibility of someone else at the head of Fazbear becoming corrupt and turning evil. Maybe there'll be a new William Afton one day. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it, I don't know what else we could pull from this game about William Afton, but I'm sure there's lots of things we still haven't even found yet. Be sure to let us know you want more lists on William Afton by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Cult of Afton runs Fazbear Entertainment. Speaking of the possible ulterior motives of Fazbear Entertainment and their still possible connection to Afton and Emily, just why was the Mega Pizzaplex built on top of the ruins of another Freddy Fazbear location? While Vanny seems to be the only loyal follower of William Afton that we see in Security Breach, is it possible that there are corrupt forces working from within the Fazbear Entertainment company, and that Vanny isn't the only one? That they are the ones who arranged it so that the Pizzaplex would be built in the first place on top of these ruins, and even placed Vanny/Vanessa there so that she could recover Afton's body in secret. I'm just saying, there are a lot of spooky coincidences that seem to have happened that seem, well, just too bizarre to actually be coincidences.
And at 7, Future Villain. After the canon ending, the blob ends up grabbing William and then we don't know what happens to him, okay? There's unused death animations for Afton in the game files, but they are unused, so we can't really take them as canon. But in the books, Elizabeth leaves Afton for dead, so maybe that's the case here. Like, the blob stops him from leaving and assures his death, like, just, like, wrings out his neck. I mean, it's certain that the antagonist wanted to be left obscure since we kinda killed it at figuring things out this time around. But with someone new coming to take over, it's always a good idea to have multiple directions for them to go. Like how they can pretty much go anywhere with the Spider-Man movies now thanks to No Way Home. So while we don't know for sure how Afton fits into the next game, or even if he does, after Security Breach we know that we could be seeing him again very soon. Depending on how soon the next game comes out, at least. We expect too much from the 87-day sequel that started off this thing. Scott, you shouldn't have done that. I mean, I get why you did it because, like, Bite of 87, but still, you shouldn't have done it. And at 6, animatronic. I've denied that William Afton is an animatronic forever. I never put him on the scariest FNAF animatronics list or whatnot because I didn't believe that he was one. He was a guy controlling a suit being kept alive by the one you should not have killed. Thus, him being a man with robotic enhancements and not an animatronic. However, now, after Security Breach, it looks like I can finally stop saying that, since from the looks of it, Burntrap is actually dead. And while this could mean that he's allowed to be Glitch Trap, William is still trying to take control of Freddy, thus us knowing that he's possessed that animatronic suit like the original 5 missing kids possessed the original 5 animatronics. It's kind of poetic, since while his jaw is visible, the rest of his body seems to have burnt up in the FNAF 6 fire, resulting in his weight being supported by the endoskeleton. That just kind of proves that he's possessed the robot. Which also makes sense with the way that he walks, since now, like, he shambles, and because he's not used to walking without the support of his full body and the animatronics, so, like, you know. He was also like a 90-year-old man at this point, so I can get why he shambles. He's fully possessed the animatronic now. Burntrap is the first version of Springtrap or Scraptrap or William Afton that is an animatronic. Halfway through into number 5, the inside. We know at this point that Afton has to have someone inside Fazbear Entertainment still working in his best interests. The suggestion for Vanessa as Night Guard came from the top, meaning that they're high up, as we learned from one of the lore duffel bags, and influential enough in the company to build the Pizzaplex on top of the FNAF 6 pizzeria so that William wouldn't be randomly found by some crazy kids looking for a thrill in a pizzeria. They'd be found by a crazy kid hiding inside an animatronic in a pizzeria. Since that sort of thing happens way too often in this series. Which begs the additional question, is this because they're related? Is this because they're related, they know each other, or is Afton controlling more than one person with this virus? But either way, with everything that's lining up for him, there is no way it's an accident. Oh no, not in this series. In any series, I would still find this to be a little too much, but in FNAF, there is a 0.000-1% chance that this is a coincidence, okay? There's no way that this kind of thing worked out this well, for this character especially. Hell no. And at 4, recharge. William needing to recharge is certainly something that's interesting from a game perspective now that we know more about what's been going on. Perhaps the recharge stations were built because Afton needed one, and the horrible animatronics needing to get in a recharge station every hour is because William needed an excuse to have one actually made so that they could bring it down for him. Because, like, I'm sure it took more than an hour to dig that tunnel, and there is a recharge station in that area because of that. But William needs to recharge now, seemingly, making me think that we won't really have to deal with him for much longer until, like, the MCU decides that FNAF is also in the Marvel universe, and then Afton gets an arc reactor, because that's definitely gonna happen at this point. Disney's gonna be like, FNAF, I want it, and then the next person's gonna sell it, and then boom, MCU.
Number 3, Elizabeth Afton and William Afton team up. It's also very possible that Elizabeth Afton and William Afton have both managed to somehow live on and continue to survive. Heck, even Michael Afton could be, I don't know, mixed in there somewhere for all we know. While Elizabeth Afton was supposed to have been freed in spirit at the end of Pizzeria Simulator, the Blob seems to be an amalgamation of many Freddys and all the other animatronics that were burned at the ending of that game. That would include Circus Baby as well. What if the Blob struggled with whether or not to fight William, as within the tangled mess there were various consciousnesses with various allegiances, but in the end Circus Baby won out and decided to save him because she's still maybe part Elizabeth? The fact that the Blob even seems to have some kind of will of its own seems to imply that the spirits within those animatronics somehow lingered and were not fully, at least, freed, which could mean we could see the return of Circus Baby teaming up with her dad in the future. Sounds terrifying. Or we could simply see a return of the Blob fully amalgamated with Burntrap as well. A very permanent kind of terrifying team up. Number 2, 99.9% immortal. At this point, I think we can say that William Afton has achieved immortal status. I'm saying it. Let's get a stamp or something for this guy. Immortal. 99.9% immortal at least. The guy has come back from everything, and even when we thought he was finally gone, he still survived via some kind of, I don't know, ID chip in a suit? Afton ends up having his soul uploaded into the game Help Wanted and is somehow able to reunite said soul with his very, very, very dead at this point, crispy and falling apart body. How do you even use that body? At this point, I'm convinced that Afton has become a supernatural being because as long as his soul or a remnant of it is still around, he just can't be destroyed. Also, how do you kill someone's soul? I don't know how to do that. That is probably the key to defeating him at this point, to be honest. But I don't know how you kill someone's soul. I don't think we've got to that point yet in these games. Number 1, more powerful than ever. The crazy thing when it comes to William Afton's appearance in Security Breach, the real crazy thing, another crazy thing I guess I should say at this point, and his move from Glitch Trap to Burntrap is that even while in his Burntrap form, he still seems to possess digital powers. What does this mean? Possibly that we have an even more powerful version of William Afton on our hands moving forward. Not only is he pretty much immortal and has proven to be virtually unkillable, but now he has both digital corruption powers and also possesses a physical form. I mean, it's a rough physical form, but it's still there. We also know that William Afton is likely some kind of charming figure who can easily influence others, as this has been implied in earlier canon within the games, and in the books. I mean, he must be charming in some capacity. He ended up with kids somehow, and he also ended up as one of the heads of a successful franchise, semi-successful franchise I guess, despite being a murderer, right? How did he do that? Also, a lot of people that are serial killers tend to be like weirdly charming, so if you ever meet someone that's a little too charming, I'm just saying, watch out. Number 10, corruption. One of the things we learn in our fight against William Afton is that he seeks to corrupt other animatronics, even good animatronics like Glamrock Freddy, who is pretty much our ally throughout the game and ultimately wants to help us get out of the Pizzaplex safely. In the final boss fight, Afton in his current in-game form will attempt to take control of Glamrock Freddy, and we have to try and harm him to prevent him from doing so. You know that he was successful when Freddy's eyes glow purple. If this happens, he will attempt to harm instead of help Gregory, aka you. Number 9, an army of animatronics. While you can try to prevent Glamrock Freddy from becoming corrupted, there are some animatronics that you can't really save from Afton's influence. Eventually, Glamrock Chica, Roxanne Wolf, and Montgomery Gator will all join him in his attempt to attack Gregory. The Blob, or I guess the Freddy amalgamation if you prefer, also seems to be in league with Afton, at least initially in the game. Although they are not specifically controlled by Afton, which means they either simply want to join Afton's cause because they believe in it for some reason, or have their own reasons for lashing out at young Gregory. The other animatronics don't seem to be in control of their behavior and are more like William Afton's puppets, completely controlled and willed to cause harm by Afton himself, likely going against their own initial programming. Number 8, Hunter. While later on, Afton mainly relies on his influence over the other animatronics to do his bidding, initially he was involved, possibly directly, in taking out any Fazbear employees who came to investigate just what he was up to in the tunnels below the Pizzaplex. Large quantities of power were being drained down there, and when employees were sent to investigate, none of them managed to ever return apparently. This implies that they were all killed, likely by Afton himself in his new form as Burntrap, or some lesser form of him perhaps as he bided his time becoming Burntrap, improving his appearance and gaining more and more power. Improving his appearance. Ugh. It's not really improved, he's pretty gross. And as he gained more and more power, literally with electrical power, and on an influential scale. Number 7, new voice actor. An interesting detail when it comes to the character's evolution in Security Breach is that it seems like Michael Curtis was going to be the voice of William Afton. From the trailers, that is what was implied. At least that's definitely what I was picking up on. And yet before, the main voice actor for William Afton, the one that we'd come to know from Sister Location at least, was PJ Haywood. The even stranger thing is if William Curtis was meant to play the role of William Afton, and the lines he uttered in the trailer, which hackers have claimed in the files are actually linked to Burntrap within the game, then why didn't he actually get to do those lines in the games? It seems like there must have been a directional shift when it came to the content that it was suggested we were going to get. It seems, based on the trailers, that Afton, Vanny, and possibly the security guard Vanessa were all going to play more important and prevalent roles in the game. It also kind of seems like we could have gone one of two ways with either like Vanessa helping us or Freddy helping us. Or maybe there's a version of the game where they both help us, I don't know. And yet we didn't see as much from any of these characters as we thought we would. Or at least we didn't see what we thought we would from them. So were the whole scenes that Curtis recorded lines for tossed? Or was the direction changed much earlier on? Is Curtis's voice really even meant to be William Afton? Or is this supposed to be some other character? I know this is more questions than answers, but this is another case where knowledge kind of just leads to more theories and speculations than any correct answers. Number 6, maybe no longer British? The really interesting thing about having William Afton potentially recast in Security Breach is that it implies that he somehow may have lost his British accent, at least based on the voice that we heard. When PJ Haywood voiced William Afton in Sister Location, he was distinctly British. This was a character who definitely had a British accent. And yet if Michael Curtis is doing a voice for William Afton in the trailer, and those unused files were found under the header of Burntrap in the games, he somehow, I guess, lost his British accent? So is he British or is he American? Or is he from somewhere else? It's possible that being burned severely might have also altered his vocal cords, or just that over time his accent diminished or changed, which can happen. I mean, after all, when we heard him in Sister Location, I think it was mainly in like flashback stuff, so I don't know, maybe it's been a long time and now all of a sudden his accent is gone. After all, dialects come from what we hear around us and are built over time through speech patterns based on those sounds. So if he had been in the US for, I guess, a long period of time, it is possible his voice could have changed. Then he could still be British, but you know, with an American accent, because his British accent sort of faded away. It should be noted though that the older that you are, the more unlikely it becomes that your voice would change like this. Which of course also begs the question, how old is William Afton anyways? Do we even know? Number 5, rescued at the last moment. It's very unlikely that William Afton is actually dead. Although we talked about that being what seems to happen on the part 1 of this list, when it comes to Afton's fate and him being attacked by the Freddy amalgamated blob and pulled back deeper into the ruins as everything caved in around them, it's also just as likely that the blob was maybe saving Afton instead. After all, while the blob may be a monster, they also seemingly lashed out along with Burntrap originally, and they are after all an amalgamation of his creations. They also tried to kill Gregory. You can die from the blob. Freddy is kind of like William's child as well, and it's possible that even while horribly disfigured, they still felt an allegiance to their creator. Perhaps at the last minute the blob is trying to save Afton. Although it looks like they are pulling Burntrap further in towards this cave-in, they could also know of an escape route that was simply safer than the one Gregory and Glamrock Freddy seem to be taking, and they could be attempting to pull Afton towards safety instead so that he could escape and live another day. Although, to be honest, I feel like he's lived enough days. However, this would possibly allow Afton to return in future games. Number 4, William Afton's final creation? Where did the blob come from? Well, we don't have a concrete answer at this point, as with so many things in the FNAF lore, some fans have been pointing to the books for answers. On Reddit, one user known as Pickletrip Jr. in the 5 Nights at Freddy subreddit responded to a post centered on the blob that was started up by user Spiritual Distance 168, where they brought up the fact that in Fourth Closet, the version that we see of William Afton there is actually experimenting with melting down the remaining animatronics and bonding them and the souls trapped within them together. He's doing this somewhere underground as well, which sounds, I don't know, pretty familiar to me based on Security Breach. If Fourth Closet is connected to this narrative, then it seems like it might be hinting that William may have actually had a hand in the creation of the blob. Either that or it's Pizzeria Simulator. I don't know. Number 3, from whence he came. While the blob initially seems to be allied with Burntrap, as it also strikes out at Gregory, we later learned that this might not actually be the case. The blob is the one who ends up grabbing Burntrap when he tries to escape as the cave and tunnel system begins to collapse, depending on which ending you get and what's going on. It seems the blob either did not want to be left alone or actually has feelings of pain and vengeance attached to William Afton and Burntrap. Burntrap's fate remains uncertain, but it's definitely implied that he is killed during the cave-in, and likely so is the blob. Of course, this is the unkillable and seemingly immortal William Afton we're talking about, so there are also many reasons to believe that this is not the end for him, as, you know, he always comes back. Always. Number 2, death animation. While Burntrap being overtaken by the Freddy amalgamated blob / Elizabeth / just the blob, whatever you want to call it, and one of the endings seems to imply that he has died, or at the very least has been defeated, we don't actually get to see his death happen. We just see him basically like pulled away by this blob as Glamrock, Freddy, and Gregory manage to escape while the underground tunnel and cave system caves in. However, through fans hacking the game, they've claimed that they have found some unused Burntrap files, and within that an unused death animation for the character. There could still be a way to unlock those unused files, of course, as it's still early days for this game, and there are likely tons of clues and hidden lore still left uncovered as of yet. After all, this game is massive, but the other option is that Burntrap's death was initially going to be shown in one of the endings, but was ultimately cut to leave it more ambiguous as to whether or not he might return, and whether or not he actually survived. Perhaps they wanted to kill him off initially, but then decided they'd rather leave the option open for Afton to return once again. I personally think they maybe were like, we could make Vanny this big character and then like say goodbye to Afton, and then they got cold feet as they were getting near the end of that. They're like, oh, people won't like it if Afton's gone. Of course, all of the people that have played the game are like, more Vanny, less Afton. Number 1, no jump scare. Although all the other animatronic antagonists in Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach have their own jump scare if they manage to catch you, Burntrap is the only animatronic who doesn't seem to have one. This is likely because, well, he doesn't really catch you himself, but instead gets other animatronics to lash out at you, preferring to use them to get to you instead of pursuing you as Gregory himself. This just goes to show us how much this character has evolved and really grown in terms of his power, becoming the mastermind who pulls the strings as opposed to doing his own dirty work. And I know what you're all gonna say, he's always been the mastermind. Amanda, you're right, he has been, but I just mean, remember initially he used to kill people, that was his thing. And now he's like, nah, everyone else just kill people for me. I'm tired. I'm like, look at me, I'm barely a human anymore. I'm just a little bit of bone and a little bit of gums, that's about it.